Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to be doing our full review of The Fantastic Four First Steps. So with that, if you like random things on a random YouTube channel, like, subscribe, comment below, do all that good stuff. Let's go ahead and dive right in. So it is safe to say that of course we're going to be diving into spoiler territory, so spoiler alert warning here. If you don't want to know about specific details about the movie, definitely don't watch this video. Come back for it because I think I have a different take on this movie comparable maybe to other individuals, especially how I think they should have even changed the title to be comparable to Thunderbolts, which also had an asterisk on their title because I'm not going to spoil that movie, but it ended up being basically something else. I think this does the same thing, but maybe not intentionally. So again, I'll dive into that in a bit. But again, spoiler alert on the topic here. Now, I'm not going to go play by play here. I'm just going to give you my general thoughts and then kind of the unique thoughts of my positives and the negatives in terms of this movie here. First and foremost, let's talk about the main cast in terms of the Fantastic Four. Actually, let's talk about the themes. So one of the things that came out after the first viewing of this, I was like, okay, this is a cross between Armageddon because of the apocalyptic nature of trying to save Earth, and then it's all about family, right? Fast and the Furious. So if you think that's a good comparison, let me know. Those are the two first movies that came to mind after leaving my first viewing of this movie here. It's like, this is Armageddon and Fast and Furious combined into a Marvel movie with superheroes. I don't know if that's the right comparison, but anyway, that's my initial thought. But anyway, let's talk about the main characters in the Fantastic Four, which main characters on billing. And again, I'm going to give you guys my other opinion after this here, but let's talk about the Fantastic Four in of itself. Let's talk about Reed Richards. I think Pedro Pascal did an amazing job. A lot of people were worried, but he did definitely show his acting chops because you didn't feel like he was, was anyone else. He wasn't the Mandalorian. He wasn't, Joel from The Last of Us. He was Reed Richards. So I think ultimately he did a great job. Interesting thing, and don't want to dive into the negatives quite yet, but positively, he did get a great performance. You really didn't see too much of Mr. Fantastic. You saw his brain at work, which is, I think, his probably more superpower than the stretchability of Mr. Fantastic. So, anyway, I think he did a great job there. As for Sue Storm and the Invisible Woman, Vanessa Kirby also did a great job there. I think the chemistry of Pedro and Vanessa was fantastic. As for The Thing and Human Torch, right? They were there. They were definitely supportive cast members. But for me, their storylines were a little bit like out there, especially Johnny's, where he became a translator of a alien language, and then Ben Grimm was more of kind of like comic relief and a little bit of heart in terms of kind of his storyline, but I'll talk about that a little bit later in this video here. But no, they did a great job. I think this casting of Fantastic Four had people worried, but after watching the movie, I think everyone would be happy with their performances on there. And big shout out also to Herbie. Herbie probably was more comic relief than Ben was, and again, I don't know if Ben was designed to be comic relief or even Johnny, but Herbie did steal some moments on the screen for sure. But let's talk about my second watch here. My second watch and third watch, because I ended up watching this the third time here. You realize this asterisk that I'm talking about here, okay? Because this movie isn't really the Fantastic Four, right? Because they weren't gonna, they quickly discussed their origin story. It's in the background, but this is a story about the baby. All right, the baby is the most important character in this movie, and this baby is Franklin Richards. We know that. This wasn't, I think, what was hidden because it is front and center from the beginning of the movie. And if you were any comic book fan, you know the immense power and godlike character Franklin Richards ends up being. And of course, in this movie, you learn that as well throughout the movie, especially how Galactus goes, hey, this kid has the power of cosmic, and I think that's a little bit of a twist, right? Because but it's not even confirmed. It was Franklin Richards a mutant, or he's imbued somehow with the power of cosmic. So anyway, this is who the main character is, and that's why I think they could have took a a page out of the Thunderbolts, right? Where the Thunderbolts had the asterisk, and then at the end they made the big reveal. In this movie, really, it's also the same thing. It's Franklin Richards' first steps. And like, why is it called First Steps? Well, it's more in terms of the origin story of Franklin Richards. And I thought that was like, okay, especially the third viewing, I was like, yeah, this movie is just setting the stage for this character here. And everyone is kind of the supportive cast, even Galactus, right? Even Galactus, because there's huge gravitas put in place because Galactus wants this baby. You're like, why? Why is this so important? And if you are not a comic book viewer or a comic book reader, you might not know the backstory on the incredible power of this character, and but you do feel it in this movie. So that's my take on this, is that this is a origin story movie, not technically a Fantastic Four movie. It's Fantastic Four, just the background of it. And after the third viewing, that's how I truly feel about this movie here. So when you think about the themes and the supporting cast, right? Shia LaBeouf was there. She was great. Also, let's talk about Shia LaBeouf. And the Silver Surfer. Again, I think people had concerns, and the previous Silver Surfer was actually done very well, but she was incredible. The action sequences, everything was top notch in this movie. The visuals were top notch in this movie, especially Galactus. I think they did an incredible job on Galactus. He was menacing. He was huge. He was definitely larger than life. He was scary, threatening. Like, how do you stop this individual? And I'm going to talk about that's an issue when I dive into the cons and the issues I had with this movie. But these are trying to stay positive here, which again, I love this movie, so it's not like I had a but I do want to just talk about some of the issues. And then ultimately the Fantastic Four just ends up being a conduit to say, okay, how do we save Franklin Richards, right? That's even more so than saving Earth, in my opinion. Okay, Earth end up being like even a secondary type of saving point here. Like, for those Heroes fans out there, it's like, save the cheerleader, save the world. It was save the baby, save the world in this case scenario. So let's talk about the issues now. Let's go into the negatives and talk about the issues here. The first one that bothered me after the second viewing was how they introduced the whole time dilation thing in while the black hole sequence happened. Like, how do we get rid of the Silver Surfer? How do we escape from the Silver Surfer? And they start talking science a little bit, and you're like, okay, time dilation, great. They actually didn't need to really bring that up because it doesn't make any sense. Because if people know about the relativity and the time dilations, and you probably learned that maybe from Interstellar, like the closer you fly toward or closer you fly into a black hole, they didn't go into it, they didn't go to the event horizon, but technically speaking, Silver Surfer did, which then showed the ability for her to escape, and it took quote unquote 1 month. I don't know. Shouldn't there have been some time dilation for the Fantastic Four? Anyway, for me, I was like, it didn't make sense for them to even bring that up. Just show how incredibly strong and powerful the Silver Surfer is without needing that kind of dialogue, because it kind of threw me off a little bit. On top of that, the other issue with her story was the whole Johnny interpretation thing. It was like, I wasn't overly impressed, especially when he was talking fluent in this language. And yeah, I guess it's showing like the ability of Johnny's use of his brain power. But I don't know. It didn't. The first time was fine. I had no issues the first viewing. The second viewing, I was like, and then after the third one, it was just, it didn't. I won't say it didn't make any sense. It just wasn't highly important. Like, just because of that conversation, she betrayed Galactus, right? There wasn't enough there for me to go, oh, that's why he's betraying Galactus at the end of the movie, knocking him into the transporter. Another thing is where I think they could have done a better job. Again, that first viewing, I was just in it for the ride. The second viewing, I was like, wait a minute. Okay, Galactus does explain why this baby is so important. But then it's like, then it's just like a scramble for that child. And then, like, it's when Silver Surfer had the conversation with Johnny and just like flew away. Is that the reason why Galactus had to get off his ship and come down to Earth? Like, there was no explanation in that. They're like, oh, we're going to use the baby as bait for him to come down. Why does he have to? Did he have a I feel like they cut a conversation with the Silver Surfer, and he's like, you know, Shalabal or the Silver Surfer's like, yeah, come go get the baby, and she goes no, right? And then she's flies away or disobeys Galactus. Maybe they cut that because you're like, why does Galactus have to go down to Earth? They don't ever explain that. He just all of a sudden he shows up and he goes, yeah, I'm gonna come down. Right? I don't know. So that was an issue after definitely the third viewing. There was some disconnect on that part there. And then finally, actually there's two more after this. And then the Ben storyline with his future love, of course. But I don't know if they needed that. Right? They could have maybe set that. It's a setup for maybe in the future. But it wasn't really overly important. It was just showing the characters, a little character development. But I think the pacing of the movie would have been a little bit better, even if we didn't have some of those parts with the Thing. So with Ben Grimm here. So anyway, it's a small nitpick there. But I think the Galactus thing has an issue. Finally, with the Galactus is the OP crazy ending with Sue Storm being able to hold and push Galactus. The first viewing, fine with it. Second viewing, I was like, wait a minute. I know that she gave up her life force. Like, she gave it her all to stop Galactus, right? There's no way. There's zero. Again, I may be just coming from a comic book mindset here. I was like, there's zero way. Sue Storm is now a Omega level type of character because she has the ability to do this. Right? Like, could the Scarlet Witch even hold and push Galactus? I don't think so. So you're telling me Sue Storm could? Right? So what I would have wished they would have done is they would have showed some sort of exchange between the baby and her, and the baby like imbuing her with something. Like saying, well, here's a little something for you. Like, I know at the end of the movies, like the big reveal of the kid being able to resurrect her from the dead because she gave it all was a very tender moment. But I think even adding just a little extra, because we all knew the baby was going to do something, right? The suspense really wasn't there. It was like, okay, you know, how is it going to do it? And it played out really nicely. But if they would have had one part where the baby touched Sue or you know, gave, you know, a little kiss or a nudge, and then she all of a sudden got some, like, you know, purple eyes or something like that, just for like a half a second, would at least gave us comic book people some realization of like, okay, so Franklin Richards imbued her with some power for her to do this, because ultimately there's just no way there's no way that she was able to push Galactus around. So with that being said, all right, that's again nitpicking in my opinion with these issues here. All in all, the movie did move fine. The pacing was a little bit slow during the character development and the world building moments, but it was needed, right? It was good, it was needed. But after multiple viewings, it just turned into a little bit different. Let's talk about the post-credit scene, where it is the introduction of Doctor Doom, which was fine. I think that was actually a good move. And then also a little bit of older Franklin Richards. Again, this is a Franklin Richards origin story. No doubt about it. Asterisk, Franklin Richards' next step. Because you go from birth, from conception, technically speaking, right? So from, or at least being, you know, knowing that, you know, that Sue was pregnant, to birth, to now, you know, a toddler. this is definitely an origin story for Franklin Richards, not much so for the Fantastic Four. Again, we now know about the Fantastic Four, but man, Franklin Richards is going to be a huge part of this. So ultimately here, again, the asterisk, right? The asterisk, I think, is a mindset you might want to go in if you're going to go watch it another time and say, yeah, this is an absolute origin story. This isn't, just the background is the Fantastic Four. And I had this at an 8.8, 8.9 in my first viewing, but I did drop it down to 8.4. No pun intended, I guess. I don't know. It just ended up being 8.4 for the Fantastic Four here for Steps. And I think it's a fair score after kind of seeing it multiple times and going, okay, yeah, there are some issues here. But I think for viewers that watch it the first time, it's not going to be a problem. I think if you just have a mind like me, you're like, okay, you're just overthinking it. Did you just enjoy the movie? Yes, I enjoyed the movie. Anything above a 7 for me is very much enjoyable. Like 8.4 is in the great arena. 9 is super hard to get, and I don't give out 10. So anyway, there it is. 8.4 is my full review here for Fantastic Four asterisk Franklin Richards for Steps. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you guys have that, maybe the same perspective that I have on there. So anyway, hopefully you guys enjoy this video here, and we'll catch you next time. Later.